World War II was supposed to be the war that ended all wars, but when the dust settled, a new conflict was already brewing, a battle that would stretch across continents, divide nations, and threaten the world with total destruction. This was the Cold War, and in its shadow, an even bigger story was unfolding: the collapse of empires, the rise of new nations, and a fierce global struggle between imperialism and anti-imperialism. Today, we dive into a world being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. At the end of World War II, the world's power map was completely redrawn. Europe was devastated. Its old colonial powers, Britain, France, and the Netherlands, were exhausted, both militarily and economically. Meanwhile, two new giants emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. They were allies in name, but in reality, their visions for the future couldn't have been more different. The Cold War wasn't about direct fighting between the US and the Soviet Union. It was a war of influence and ideology: capitalism versus communism, democracy versus dictatorship, freedom versus control. At least that's how each side liked to frame it. In truth, both superpowers often betray their own ideals to gain the upper hand. At the same time, across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, a different kind of revolution was taking place. Colonies that had been ruled for decades, even centuries, by European powers were demanding independence. Some, like India, achieved it through negotiation and civil disobedience. Others, like Algeria or Vietnam, had to fight bloody wars to break free. This era was known as decolonization, but it wasn't as simple as colonies gaining freedom and living happily ever after. Decolonization happened right in the middle of the Cold War, and every newly independent country became a potential prize in the global match between America and the Soviet Union. For many new nations, the world wasn't divided into democracy and communism. It was divided into imperialism and anti-imperialism. To them, the old colonial powers and the new Cold War superpowers often looked similar: powerful countries interfering in the lives and futures of weaker ones. And when resources like oil were involved, that interference turned deadly. In 1951, Iran elected a prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh. He wasn't a communist, as he believed in democracy, but he made a bold move. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, kicking out British oil companies that had long profited off Iran's resources. Britain was furious. They teamed up with the United States, claiming Mossadegh might open Iran to Soviet influence. In 1953, the CIA helped orchestrate a coup. Mossadegh was overthrown. The Shah, a monarch who supported Western interests, was installed as Iran's ruler. Democracy in Iran was crushed, not by communists, but by the so-called defenders of democracy themselves. The 1953 Iran coup was a crystal clear example of how Cold War fears were used to justify old-school imperialism. When it came to protecting their interests, Cold War superpowers didn't hesitate to manipulate, control, and overthrow, and Iran wasn't the only flashpoint. In 1956, Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital waterway controlled by Britain and France. Western powers panicked. Without consulting, the US, Britain, France, and Israel launched a military invasion to seize the canal back. But times had changed. The United States and the Soviet Union both opposed the attack. Under intense pressure, the invading forces were forced to withdraw. Britain and France realized that they were no longer the dominant players on the world stage. The Suez Crisis marked a turning point. It wasn't just the fall of colonial control over one canal. It symbolized the collapse of European imperial power itself. The New World Order would be shaped not by Britain and France, but by America and the Soviet Union. The Cold War and decolonization weren't separate stories. They were deeply connected. As old empires crumbled, the United States and the Soviet Union scrambled to reshape the world in their own image, often crushing local movements in the process. Was the Cold War truly a fight for freedom, or was it just a new face of imperial control wrapped in different flags and slogans? The answers are messy, but understanding this complexity is the key to understanding the world we live in today. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below.